If you've been scrolling through social media or reading the news lately, you've probably seen alarming headlines about U.S. immigration in January 2026, and maybe you're sitting there right now wondering if everything is about to fall apart, if your visa application is in danger, or if the rules are going to change overnight and leave you stranded. I completely understand that fear, and I want you to take a breath. Because what I'm about to share with you over the next several minutes is going to cut through the noise, separate the facts from the rumors, and give you the clarity you've been searching for. My name is Saqib, and this is Global Immigration Updates, the channel where we don't do panic, we don't do speculation, and we don't spread rumors. We focus on facts, clear explanations, and helping you understand exactly what's happening in the world of immigration so you can make informed decisions without the stress and confusion. So let's talk about what's actually happening with U.S. immigration policies in January 2026. And more importantly, let's talk about the positive shift that many people are either not aware of or are misunderstanding because of how the information is being presented online. First, I need to address something very important. When you see a headline that says immigration policies are changing, your brain immediately goes to the worst-case scenario. You think about deportations, you think about visa denials, you think about borders closing. That's a normal human reaction, especially if you or someone you love is navigating the immigration system right now. But here's what you need to understand. Immigration policy changes happen regularly, and not all changes are negative. In fact, some changes are designed to make the system more efficient, more fair, and more accessible. January 2026 is seeing a mix of both procedural updates and policy clarifications that, when you actually look at the details, point toward a more organized and predictable system, not a chaotic one. Let me walk you through what's actually happening, step by step, so you can see the full picture. One of the key developments in January 2026 involves updates to processing times and case backlogs at USCIS, which is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. For years, one of the biggest complaints from applicants has been the unpredictability of processing times. You file your application, you pay your fees, and then you wait, sometimes for months or even years, with very little communication about where your case actually stands. That uncertainty creates stress, financial strain, and planning difficulties for families and workers alike. What's happening now is that USCIS has implemented new internal systems designed to improve transparency and reduce backlogs in certain visa categories. This includes employment-based green cards, family-based petitions, and certain work authorization renewals. Now, this doesn't mean your case will be approved overnight, but it does mean that the system is moving toward more predictable timelines and better communication with applicants, which is absolutely a positive shift. Another area where we're seeing movement is in the H-1B visa program. The H-1B is one of the most widely used work visas in the United States, primarily for skilled workers in fields like technology, engineering, healthcare, and education. Over the past few years, there have been ongoing debates about how the H-1B lottery system works, whether it's fair, and whether it truly prioritizes the most qualified candidates. In January 2026, there are new guidelines in place that aim to reduce fraud in the lottery system and ensure that legitimate employers and qualified workers are not being crowded out by duplicate or questionable applications. Some people are interpreting this as a restriction, but in reality, it's a cleanup effort. If you are a genuine applicant with a legitimate job offer from a reputable employer, these changes actually work in your favor because they level the playing field and reduce the chances of your application being lost in a sea of fraudulent entries. Now let's talk about family-based immigration, because this is an area where a lot of fear and misinformation tends to spread. Family-based immigration allows U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents to sponsor certain family members for green cards. The process has always been lengthy, especially for applicants from countries with high demand, and the waiting times can stretch into years or even decades, depending on the category and country of origin. What's happening in January 2026 is not a shutdown of family-based immigration, not a removal of categories, and not a sudden change in eligibility. What is happening is a recalibration of visa bulletin predictions and priority date movements based on updated demand data. In some categories, priority dates are moving forward, which means people who have been waiting are getting closer to their interview and approval. In other categories, movement is slower, which is frustrating but not unusual. The important thing to understand is that the system is still functioning, cases are still being processed, and if you have a pending family-based petition, it has not been canceled or invalidated. You are still in the queue, and your case will be adjudicated according to the rules that were in place when you filed. I also want to address something that's causing a lot of confusion, and that's the difference between a policy proposal and an actual implemented law. On social media, you'll see people sharing screenshots of proposed bills, draft executive orders, or statements from politicians, and they present these as if they are already in effect. That is not how the U.S. legal system works. A proposal is just that, a proposal. For something to become law, it has to go through Congress, it has to be signed by the president, and in many cases, it has to go through a public comment period and legal review. For an executive order to take effect, it has to be issued, published, and often it will face court challenges before it's actually enforced. What this means for you is that if you see something alarming online, your first step should be to ask yourself, is this a proposal or is this actual law? If it's a proposal, it may never happen. If it's a law, then you need to look at the effective date and the specific language to understand who it actually affects. So, who is actually affected by the changes we're seeing in January 2026? Let's be very specific here. If you are currently in the United States on a valid visa, your status has not changed. If you have a pending application with USCIS, your application is still being processed. If you are a green card holder, your permanent residency has not been revoked. If you are a U.S. citizen, nothing about your citizenship has changed. The updates we're talking about primarily affect new applicants, people who are in the process of filing, and people who are subject to specific visa categories that are being administratively updated for efficiency and fraud prevention. If you fall into one of those categories, you should review the specific USCIS policy updates that apply to your case. And if you're working with an immigration attorney, you should consult with them to understand how the changes affect your timeline and strategy. Now, what should you actually do if you're concerned about your immigration case or your future plans? The first thing is to stay informed, but stay informed from the right sources. USCIS.gov is the official website of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. That is where you will find policy memos, processing time updates, and official announcements. Congress.gov is where you can track actual bills that are being introduced and voted on. The State Department website is where you can find information about visa bulletins and consular processing. These are your primary sources of truth, not social media, not random YouTube videos that use scary thumbnails and clickbait titles, and definitely not rumors from friends or community groups who mean well but don't have access to accurate information. If your case is complex, or if you're unsure about your next steps, consult with a licensed immigration attorney. Do not rely on notarios or unlicensed consultants who promise quick fixes or guaranteed results, because that is how people end up with denied applications and wasted money. I also want to remind you of something very important. Immigration rules in the United States do not change overnight. The system is large, it's bureaucratic, and it moves slowly. That slowness can be frustrating when you're waiting for an approval, but it's also a protection because it means that sudden, drastic changes are rare and usually subject to legal review and public accountability. Even when a new policy is announced, there is almost always a grace period, a transition period, or a grandfathering clause that protects people who are already in the system. If you are in the middle of a process, you are not going to wake up tomorrow and find out that your case has been thrown out. That's not how it works. Let me also address the emotional side of this, because I know that when you're dealing with immigration, it's not just paperwork. It's your life, it's your family, it's your career, it's your dreams. And when you see headlines that suggest everything is falling apart, it's terrifying. But I want you to remember that fear sells clicks, and a lot of what you're seeing online is designed to get your attention, not to inform you. The reality is that millions of people successfully navigate the U.S. immigration system every single year. Visas are approved, green cards are issued, citizenship ceremonies happen, and families are reunited. The system is not perfect, and it's not fast, but it is functional, and it does work for people who follow the rules and stay informed. So here's the bottom line. January 2026 is not bringing an immigration apocalypse. What it is bringing is a series of administrative updates, procedural improvements, and policy clarifications that are designed to make the system more efficient and reduce fraud. Some of these changes will speed things up for certain applicants. Some will require patience. But none of them represent a shutdown, a mass deportation, or a fundamental dismantling of the immigration system. If you are in the process, stay the course. If you are planning to apply, do your research and file correctly. If you are worried, seek professional guidance from someone who is licensed and qualified to give it. And please, do me a favor. If this video helped you understand what's really happening, if it gave you some peace of mind, or if it cleared up confusion that you've been carrying around, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. We upload fact-based immigration updates regularly, and we're here to help you stay informed without the panic. Share this video with anyone you know who might be worried about their immigration status or their future in the United States. And if you have questions, leave them in the comments below. I read them, and I do my best to point you in the right direction, though I can't give personal legal advice. Immigration is complicated, but it doesn't have to be confusing. With the right information, the right mindset, and the right sources, you can navigate this process with confidence. Stay calm, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next update.